Okay, let's take a look at plot and then symbolism, which can be one of the tougher ones for some people, but I think is one of the most valuable ones for the concept of get in there and explain what's going on and what's the deeper meaning and how can we apply it to show what the author is giving us. What are the parts of plot? Well, there's exposition or backstory, the setup, everything that happens before we get to what our characters are up to. Cinderella's mother died and her dad died and she swept the floor for 10 years, and that's when our story begins. That's exposition. Obviously, opening number, we summarize quite a lot of Hamilton. Initiating or inciting incident. Something happens. Well, in this one, Hamilton's hurricane makes him write his way out, and he goes off to America, and that's when our story starts. Cinderella gets a ball invitation. Sure. Rising action. We've got little things happening. We've got little conflicts and resolutions. We're heading toward the big exciting part of the story, which is in fact called the climax, when the character is going to win everything or lose everything. The climax has to do with whatever the character wants most. This is the moment when it's most in danger. Hamilton's final duel with Burr would be the biggest climax of several, because this is the moment where he really is going to lose everything. And unlike many characters, he does. So then we wrap it up. Maybe there's a little blip of a plot, but basically we're done. After Hamilton is shot, or so many characters get what they've been questing for, we just kind of need to wrap it up, have a final party or something, have characters say what we learned, and we're heading toward the end. And then we're at the denouement or resolution, the conclusion, at which point we're back to flat. We're back to, and then they lived happily ever after for the rest of their days, and then nothing exciting ever happened for decades, yeah. Eliza goes back to exposition and wraps up everything that happens. Some other things that we could think about in terms of the plot. Catharsis is when you're just letting out all your strong emotions, and often this is for the audience as well as the characters. By watching this happen, we get to laugh, cry, and come out wrung out from our strong emotions. Hamilton's sad song about his son dying would have a lot of that. Cliffhanger comes from the really dramatic stories where a hero or heroine would be left dangling off the edge of a cliff, and that's when we close our chapter or say that we'll resume the radio show next week or something. Act 1 is pretty resolved, but we do have this lingering question about Hamilton will balance his ambition and his family. Deus ex machina, God in a box. Greek theater, which also gave us the concept of catharsis, often ends with the gods, or one of them, show up and just kind of solve everything. Hi, Theseus, you made a wrong choice, and that's why your son died, and I'm going to punish you and reward you, and okay, we're all done now. Nowadays, it's often being used to refer to when, again, some higher authority shows up and just shuts everything down or solves everything. I've seen some Sherlock Holmeses where Queen Victoria shows up at the end and goes, yeah, we're not doing that. You're rewarded. You're punished. This is what's going to happen. Okay, we're done. In Hamilton, we get a bit of this because Angelica shows up to wrap up the Reynolds pamphlet. There is a longer version called Congratulations, where she just shows up, and again, you made the wrong choice. Here's what's going to happen. You and I are not having an affair. I'm siding with my sister. Here's your punishment. An epilogue, an afterword, what happened in the decades that followed. We get that. Eucatastrophe, when everybody's rescued and we don't have a catastrophe. That you would mean good. Yorktown, they're suddenly saved from horrible things happening. Flashback, when we go back into something that happened before, we have some fascinating flashbacks with the turntable and the characters showing us that they're going back in time for Satisfied. We get extra symbolism with distorted sound, like they're actually rewinding a tape or something like that, or moving a record backwards. And her remember, 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 remember. Again, sounds like we're cycling, cycling, cycling. And of course, it changes the meaning of what happened in Helpless and the wedding. Flash forward, you could have that as well, of course. Framing device. When we've got an outside story, or in all those Disney cartoons where you see them open a book at the beginning and then close a book at the end, that's a framing device. If you've got any sort of a narrator or a let's perform this story for you or anything like that, that goes at the beginning and the end, that would in fact be framing this. The other choice would be in media res, opening a story at the middle of the action. When do we meet Indiana Jones? Not when he's teaching and gets his case. We meet him when he's in the middle of a conflict and boulders are gonna crush him, and we meet him at the exciting part. And that's pretty typical for James Bond, Mission Impossible action movies. And then after that, we go to a slower place where our hero gets the case in media res. Obstacles. Problems that stop the character from getting what he or she wants. Pace. Is it fast or slow? Short sentences, fast music, shocking events, and action scenes can speed it up. Plot twist, a surprise for the audience. Poetic justice. Well, kind of like fairy tale justice, where the good characters are rewarded and the bad characters are punished. Hamilton, that isn't really what happens, is it? Hamilton's fatal flaw brings him down, but if Jefferson and Madison are the bad guys, they become presidents. And of course, the whole issue of slavery is still lingering. We could have a prologue setting up beforehand what happens, summarizing what's going to come. A very famous prologue is in Romeo and Juliet that completely spoils the whole play. Reveal, when a large secret comes out, like the Reynolds pamphlet. Scene changes in theater, we're at Eliza's house, then we're back at the war, that kind of thing. Sometimes they move on furniture or change the lighting, sometimes they don't. A scene. We're at Eliza's house, we deal with this whole chunk of story, and then we're done. And Burr often sets these moments up. Self-fulfilling prophecy. The hero's trying to make his destiny happen, and he does. In fact, Hamilton keeps trying to avoid his fate of getting into politics, offending Burr. He and Burr have a shootout, but it still happens. Subplot, a little plot that doesn't really affect the big one. Like some subplots like Burr's wife's death and Ben Franklin's adventures in France get cut because they don't fit the big story so much. Surprise, when something startling happens. The opposite would be suspense, where we set it all up, where you see Burr and Hamilton writing these letters to each other where you see them building up toward the shooting. And of course, when we've been told at the beginning that Burr is going to shoot Hamilton, it's all, after that, we know it's coming, so it's suspense. All right. Well, point of view, I think I will summarize the main ones by saying the first person is I or we. Second person is you, which is unusual. Third person is he or she. The author may not be the same person as the narrator. In this case, the author is Miranda and the narrator is Burr, right? And they have different opinions about what's going on. Could have multiple narrators. Could babble everything in stream of consciousness like Hamilton's death scene. Your third person, he or she could know everything that's going on or be really puzzled about what everybody else is thinking because they don't have access to other people's heads. We also could have a narrator that we don't trust, an unreliable narrator who doesn't know stuff or doesn't understand what's happening or even is totally lying to us. Burr's hatred of Hamilton does make us not completely trust his view of events. So that was some point of view. All right. Symbolism. There's a few kinds. Conventional symbols are things everybody's decided are a symbol that represents something. Why do stars and stripes represent the US? Because some people sat around a table and decided they should. That's not a natural symbol. That's not logical. It isn't like the shape of the continent or something. It's just what some people decided. But everybody agrees, with the poison symbol or a white flag or, yeah. Natural symbols are coming out of nature, so nobody decided, they just happened. Like dawn is a beginning and hurricane is destruction and lack of control. Literary symbols are whatever this author or that author chooses to do with them, which could be any number of things. In Hunger Games, roses represent evil because the bad guy is always wearing roses. This is a little unusual because roses as a natural symbol or a symbol everybody's agreed on, a conventional symbol, tend to be positive. Sure. In this show, we can analyze symbols. Sometimes they are very specific items, like Hamilton's glasses or something, and sometimes they're anything we see. Clothing choices, lighting, the setting, the sets on the stage, anything. In fact, we've got all this wooden scaffolding, and we've got the stage back, which is a partially built brick wall, and during intermission they add some more lines, and this suggests we're building the country. The country is unfinished. It's a work in progress. It looks like New York is being created. We've got nods to shipbuilding with all the wood and all the ropes. Sure, it doesn't look like the Capitol. It doesn't look like the Washington Monument. It looks like the most basic building blocks of the country, which reflects what the characters are up to. So back to our question number 2, what does this do? What does this affect the story? The question you ask is, how do these symbols relate to what's going on? How do these symbols reflect moments out of the story or the characters? Also, if we removed these symbols, what would we lose? That's always a good question. Adding these things in here, what does it add? How do we feel if the Schuyler sisters are singing about, it's so exciting, we're in the middle of New York being built, and behind them they've got all this scaffolding? How would it be different if we saw a fully formed city around them? Or a realistic city, because this is not what everyone would have seen in New York at the time, right? In the opening number, everybody's wearing kind of an off-white color. This suggests ghostliness and tragedy. They're all dead now. Whether they die in the story or not, they're all dead now. They've stepped out of the pages of a book. It's kind of parchment colored clothing. Burr stands out in his red coat. Red is power, pride, battle, and also he's alive. He's important in this ghostly or coming out of the pages of a book tableau we've got here. Eliza brings Hamilton a brown coat. Hamilton changes coats a lot in the show. It tends to indicate a new role for him. Okay, now you're supposed to be a soldier. Now you're supposed to be this or that. Well, his brown coat is a humble color, a practical color for traveling in, a manly color, suggesting being an immigrant. Also suggests, of course, that she's going to be sewing his clothes for some time and taking care of him. He hands the white coat to Burr. Burr is his helper in this. Angelica hands him books. We all know what books symbolize, intellect, cleverness, being well-read, anything like that. Lorenz gives him the travel bag that suggests that, they're going to have travel bags and being supporting people in their future. In fact, they're both going to be aides to camp. The stairs descend like New York is coming into being around him and being created around him. When Burr says, "I'm the damn fool who shot him," Hamilton comes up behind him and takes his place. Burr is no longer the central figure, now Hamilton is. Now, some of the things I'm saying may seem very, very obvious, or they might seem quite a leap. How did you get there? Well, the question is, what exactly happened, and does it reflect in any way what a deeper meaning could be? What does it kind of seem like we're saying in terms of story if Burr steps aside and Hamilton takes his place? When they meet, Hamilton is in brown, but Burr is in red, wealth, privilege, and also he's going to be the devil on Hamilton's shoulder. As we sing together in my shot, we've got the tavern people singing with him, and then the scene opens up to the streets of New York, and the scaffolding lights up, and more people join him for this, emphasizing how the world is wider and wider. And the turntable spins. What does this suggest? It suggests a wider world, time passing, moving through space, and that the world is spinning round and round and becoming something new. Eliza is in green, like a nurturer, somebody who makes things grow, like Hamilton in the New Country. Peggy is in yellow, bright, innocent, youthful. Eliza's kind of a peachy color, is more romantic, pink and peach, which suggest European skin color, suggest, being able to touch somebody, tend to be romantic colors. Also very girly in our society. The king, of course, is wearing this actual royal outfit, which is so heavy that he can't really move in it. And he's always isolated. I mean, yeah, he's got servants, but they only sing with him when he tells them to. He is very old monarchy in a red-purple royal light. Washington moves around a lot. He's in blue to counter the red-purple. And his color scheme suggests as he's coming on right as they're having sea battles. And also, blue suggests depression. So, what does blue suggest here? I could open up a symbolism book for what does blue suggest, or I could think about some associations, brainstorm them, and come up with ocean, actual revolutionary color, seems very military, and also blue is a depressed color. Washington gives Hamilton a pen. And the light turns purple, which is less blue, more hopeful as we head toward a better place. In Helpless, we're lit up in pink, all that romantic girly stuff I mentioned. We've entered a female space of the ball instead of the male soldier space. It's a romantic scene. Eliza is singing about being helpless, and she's at a ball where everything's spinning around. Well, everything spinning around her also suggests helplessness, doesn't it? 10 Dual Commandments, we continue with the turntable, also suggesting everything's spinning out of control. And we've got these rings of lights like a bullseye, appropriate for who's in the line of fire and going to get shot here. Hamilton finally says, all right, I'm going home, and he takes one step and he's home. Sure, they weren't going to spend 10 minutes watching him walk around, but the fact that it's only one step instead of him walking off stage and walking back on stage, that question of what would it be like if we did something different, the fact that it's only one step suggests all he had to do was decide and poof, he's there. Guns and ships, he's rapping so crazy fast, showing how amazingly fast his mind works, and showing those who have the power of rap tend to be the clever thinkers, the masters of what's going to happen. Hamilton, Angelica, Lafayette, obviously not the king who's stuck in his old-fashioned songs and not getting how the world is moving on. Eliza helps Hamilton on with his soldier's coat, and Washington gives him a sword. Before, he gave him a pen, but now he's giving him a promotion. Handing somebody a sword, handing somebody a pen is pretty obvious symbolism. One can look at deeper meaning in the lyrics. A world turned upside down. Okay, sure, we're in a revolution, but we're also trying to flip the world. Yorktown, everyone is standing on a table or a stool, and Hamilton's on his soapbox. Looks kind of like the tavern celebrations with Hamilton's speech, but they're quieter. They're very motionless, as emphasized by the fact that they're standing on something. They really can't move around that way. The light is golden, but there's still some shadows in it, like gravestones. There's still some uncertainty what's going to happen. It's a very dramatic moment, but also quiet. People aren't running around and fighting, very specifically. After this, Hamilton and Burr each have their children. They are in shirt sleeves, which makes them look much more vulnerable and domestic than if they were wearing big coats. They are dressed the same, suggesting that they're in the same place in their lives. We're going to see that again with Hamilton and Burr. If people are wearing opposite colors, it suggests they're opposed to each other, that they're foils. They both sit in squares of light that seem like nursery windows, but also rather like the people standing on stools. They're stuck in this space. They're, now you've got responsibilities at home. You need to stay in the square. You said you'd be the responsible parent and watch the kid, that kind of image. The courtrooms. As we sing about writing like you're running out of time and we get the Caribbean music going on, we're back to the spinning and spinning and spinning in a whirlwind of activity because he's rushing from activity to activity to activity. We've got a green light for Hamilton as he's writing and doing legal business. Real Hamilton's study was the green of money, actually, and he did write everywhere, but we just see him kind of bouncing around all the bits of the stage, suggesting how crazy busy he is. Likewise, the turntable carries Angelica away from him, like the sea, like ordinary life is carrying her away from him, and Eliza sails up to replace her. But then they're on either side of him, like an angel and devil, kind of. Or like, stay home versus become great, pulling him in different directions. Satisfaction versus ambition. and he climbs up the steps to join Washington. This looks like a promotion. This looks like going up to the ceiling. This looks like going up the mountain to the Capitol. Sure. End of Act 1. Act 2. Madison is in gray and Jefferson is in plum. They've stepped out of the history books to take their roles as characters. And in fact, they're going to keep being politicians in the same colors. Now they are pretty much stuck in their roles and they're not going to change much during Act 2. Hamilton is wearing green for his new political role. Green and plum are opposite colors, rather like the king's red, purple, and Washington's blue. If on one side we've got people in purple and the other side we've got people in green, Washington is in black, which is mature, but also he's stuck in the middle, neutral, the peacemaker, and Madison is in gray as the sidekick who's just kind of vanishing in the background and backing up Jefferson. Glasses suggesting age, and of course, a real moment out of history. Green suggests all the money. Washington on your side, we've got lights flashing like cannon fire because we're not doing a real war, but we're doing a symbolic war as everybody has to decide what side they're on, and the ensemble actually stand behind Jefferson, Madison, and Burr. Teach them how to say goodbye. We've got Washington and Hamilton wearing black with shirt sleeves. Again, vulnerable, casual, just two pals talking, not an official person giving a speech, and showing the parallel between these characters who are a team for one last time, in fact. The room where it happens, Burr says that he's being locked out of everything, and yes, Madison, Hamilton, and Jefferson have dinner in a light square, whereas Burr is left out in the dark. And the ensemble are dancing in their squares, emphasizing that he doesn't get to play with them. He is locked out. Hurricane, very symbolic. Everyone's just kind of frozen around him and struggling against the blue-purple storm. And it's carrying off his desk and chair, and there are these chords like a pounding gale, and the turntable spins and spins, and there he is in the eye of the hurricane with all these moments from his life, moments from his world being hurled away and spinning around him. And the set designer, David Corrins, discusses the swirling cyclical motion of the storytelling. He's swept out of town because the hurricane lets him write his way out, and then he's caught in political scandals, in the Reynolds pamphlet, in him and Burr just spinning around each other, bumping into each other. It just keeps going. So, as I keep saying, that's what you ask yourself. What extra meaning do we get from this? How is this reflecting the story? What would we lose if this got cut from the story? How does it enhance the meaning, give us some extra tone, give us some extra suggestion? And those are the things you can look for as you read. So we've had so many different techniques, all of which can help you in so many ways when you just take a closer look at what you're reading and see what the author has added that just make it extra clever, extra deep. So head out there, find some stories, and see what you can discover in them and what effect they're going to have on the meaning. Sample thesis, the creators added the turntable to show life out of control in the cases of Hamilton, Eliza, and Burr. One paragraph each, lots of suggestion, lots of details, lots of support, and there's my essay. Good luck.